Card battle video games. For many gamers, those four words bring back painful memories of that dark age in gaming from 2000 to 2006, when so many games decided they wanted to be more like Magic the Gathering. Established franchises such as Metal Gear Solid, Mega Man, Phantasy Star Online, and Kingdom Hearts are only a few of the many games that decided they needed card battle adaptations. There is one game from that time that really stood out to me though. That game is Lost Kingdoms. Now Lost Kingdoms is really unique because it had no other forms of media that accompanied it. There was no anime, there were no books, there were no comics, there wasn't even a physical game that you could play in real life. You know, with real people. It was a purely digital experience. Although it performed fairly well among fans and critics, it seems to have been forgotten over the years. So I decided to blow the dust and cobwebs off to see if this game still holds up. So here's my review of Lost Kingdoms.
Lost Kingdoms is a card battle RPG developed by From Software, the studio that would go on to create the critically acclaimed Dark Souls series. It was released for the Nintendo GameCube in 2002 and was a favorite of mine as a kid.
Before we get too far into this review, I want to make one thing completely clear. I have no idea how to say any of the names in this game.
Everything sounds like it was named using one of those elvish name generators that you could find on old Angel Cities and Geofire websites from the late 90s. I mean, just listen to some of these names. Blessoon, Shael, Dalnok, Yiprek. They're ridiculous. The game starts with the fictional land of Arguil, Arguil? Being consumed by a mysterious black fog. To combat the encroaching doom, the Five Kingdoms broke the Ancient Covenant and came out of isolation. Unbeknownst to them, an ageless evil has been reawakened. You play as Princess Katia of the Kingdom of Alanja. Katia's father, King Feobane, left on a mission to stop the Black Fog and has yet to return. As the Black Fog reaches the castle walls, Katia remembers her father's instructions to take the kingdom's magical runestone and get the heck out of Dodge. After taking the kingdom's precious irreplaceable runestone from an unguarded chest, some spooky scary skeletons block the exit. Luckily for Katia, a little divine intervention comes in to save her in the form of a magical deck of cards. Wait, what did she just say? Did she just say Hideo? What do you think she's gonna do? Summon Metal Gear Solid creator Hideo Kojima to bore him to death with a half-hour cutscene? Oh, no, just summons a Birdman. Barely 5 minutes in and we're already fighting. Combat is pretty straightforward. You have a deck of cards that you bring with you into each battle. The top 4 cards are assigned to the A, B, X, and Y buttons. You use these cards to attack the enemy until they run out of health. After your fight, you meet an old woman who's not afraid to say it like it is. You're not exactly the most fearsome warrior in the kingdom.
Come on, I just started the game. You can't expect me to be some great player from the get-go.
I don't suppose you have a burly brother stashed away somewhere.
Huh?
Even the ugliest oyster may contain a beautiful pearl?
Alright, now you've crossed the line.
In the next level, the old woman, who has the misfortune of being named Gerd, teaches you the battle mechanics and oh my god! What the fuck?
Please don't do that again.
She is terrifying! There's a lot that Gerd has to teach you, but I'm gonna do my best to summarize it as fast as I can. There are 3 different types of cards: Attack, Independent, and Summon. Attack cards give you the most control during battle. They're usually fast, do low to medium damage, and are reusable. Independent cards differ from attack cards in that you have no control over their actions. Creatures spawned from these cards are controlled by AI, thus they attack who they want, when they want. This can make them unpredictable as they might not focus on the enemy you had in mind. The last type of card is the Summon card. These cards are used to summon strong creatures to unleash devastating attacks or high-level healing magic. These cards cost a lot to use and can only be used once per battle before they are discarded. Each card costs a certain amount of magic stones to use. If you run out of magic stones, a portion of your health gets taken whenever you use a card. Strong cards use a lot of stones, which means they have the potential to use a lot of your health. So it's important to keep the stones flowing. You can pick up more by attacking enemies and collecting the stones that they drop. Cards also have one of 4 elements assigned to them, creating a sort of elemental game of rock, paper, scissors. The 4 elements are earth, fire, water, and wood, and works the way that you'd expect. Fire is strong against wood, but weak against water, you get the picture. There's also a fifth element, which is generally stronger but has no specific strengths or weaknesses against the other 4 elements.
There's a surprising amount of depth and complexity to the battle system, but I don't want to spend too much time focusing on that. Let's instead bring our attention back to the story.
Normally, the first enemies you fight in RPGs are cute little woodland creatures. Not in Lost Kingdoms. No, you get to fight against fart goblins. I am not joking, that is actually the sound that they make in-game. After killing all of the fart goblins, defeating the enemy boss, and completing your training with Gerd, Katia embarks on her quest to find her father. You search through the ruined city of Blasoon, but only find Alexander, a young man researching fairies, though I don't understand why. These things are hideous. Eventually, you make your way to the neighboring kingdom of Grail and find that their castle has been under attack by a mysterious woman intent on stealing their runestone. Her name is Helena, and she fights using magic cards just like you. She's not much of a challenge, and her dialogue sounds like something out of a middle schooler's homemade action movie. I am Helena, mark it well, for it is the name of your master. With her out of the picture, the King of Grail informs you that your father was here earlier and that you should take their runestone to keep it safe from evil. So now the scope of your quest has been expanded to find your father and collect the runestones from the other kingdoms to prevent them from falling into the hands of the enemy. The next leg of your journey has you traveling to the remaining kingdoms to collect their runestones. After King Scrooge McFancypants of Kendari kicks you out of his castle, a soldier tells you that their runestone was recently stolen and that the thief was last seen in a nearby mine. You find the runestone in the mine being guarded by monsters, and after defeating them, you add its powers to yours. On your way to the last runestone in the Kingdom of White, you witness your father get mortally wounded by a wild Beelzebub. With his dying breath, King Theobane encourages you to find the last runestone and save the world. After collecting the final runestone, Helena challenges you to a battle at the Colosseum. Not being one to turn down a challenge, you head off to face her. And oh yeah, there's a kidnapped prince that you're trying to rescue, and blah blah blah, I don't really care, he's not that important to the story. Helena's a lot stronger than before. She's added several powerful attack cards and uses summon cards very often. Once you've proved that your deck is the biggest, Helena reveals her true motive, to collect all the runestones in order to save her kingdom that is being held hostage by Thalnos the Enchanter. After she dies, Helena's runestone passes on to you, thereby increasing your powers to the max. With all the runestones in your possession, it's time to face the final boss. In the halls of Brook Black, you confront Thalnos, who started this whole mess. This battle is tough. He frequently summons strong monsters just as your attacks are about to hit him. Seriously, most of the length of this battle comes from him stopping the action to use a summon card. It's extremely frustrating as you end up wasting time and risk depleting your entire deck. After Thalnos is defeated, the true mastermind behind the Black Fog reveals himself, the God of Destruction. If you haven't noticed by now, Lost Kingdoms is filled with hideous nightmare fuel. The God of Destruction is no exception. While this fight is less frustrating than your fight with Thalnos, the God of Destruction is a mighty foe. You have to slowly chip away at his health while you avoid his devastating attacks and brief moments of invulnerability. With patience and a well-rounded deck, you're able to stop this fierce deity and end his reign of terror. By suffering defeat at the hands of a mortal, the God of Destruction decides to leave the world and its fate up to the people. The Black Fog disperses and the Lost Kingdoms, oh, now I get it, return to life as usual. Katia returns home to Alanja, where she becomes queen, with her magical runestone shining brighter than ever. As I've said before, Lost Kingdoms is one of the few card battle games that really stood out to me as a kid. Unlike the other card battle games from that era, Lost Kingdoms created a better sense of immersion. I think this is mostly due to the real-time RPG approach that the game took. Unlike turn-based RPGs, which relied on a combination of luck and strategy, the battles in Lost Kingdoms relied heavily on player skill. You needed to position yourself in just the right way to attack enemies and avoid taking damage. You could also gain experience for your cards and level them up into more powerful creatures, which I also really like doing. Another thing that really pulled me in was the diverse mythological background that the game drew from. You had all the standard mythological creatures like dragons, unicorns, and fairies, but there were also some uncommon ones like the Arabic Ifrit and the Ethiopian Katobalpas. Lost Kingdoms was also very repetitive, which could be viewed as a negative trait to some gamers, but hey, I also like Phantasy Star Online, which is pretty much the dictionary definition of repetition, so it really wasn't a problem to me.
Lost Kingdoms is one of those games that doesn't stand up well against time. While the concept is cool, the rest of the game is fairly lackluster.
The sound design is probably the worst part. I can forgive bland and forgettable music, no problem. Not every game can afford a Koji Kondo level soundtrack. But what I can't forgive are sound effects that are repetitive to the point of insanity. Every time you use an attack, Kario will make the same grunt. Every time you use a summon card, she says Hideo. I still don't know what the fuck that means. Same goes for your enemies. Thanos may be the absolute worst at this. Every red fairy makes the same goddamn noise every time you pick one up. But the worst part has to be your footsteps. They may be the loudest thing in the game. They just seem to cut through everything. The environments have the potential of being cool, but since we don't have decent control of the camera, we never really get to see them. The battle mechanics are also a bit wonky. Kadia's walking speed is super slow. This makes evading attacks nearly impossible. Although your enemies seem to have no problems dodging your attacks, it's total bullshit when the game has enemies that can do all kinds of dodging and rolling, but you have to stand there and take it like a sponge. The developers kind of fixed this by making you invulnerable when you're using a card, but it's not really the same. Kadia's slow movement speed is also a problem outside of battle. You see, there are these little blue fairies that can heal you, restore magic stones, or restore used cards, but you have to catch them first. Chasing after these smurfy bastards is one of the worst things ever. As if it wasn't bad enough that when your health is low, you move so slow that there's no hope of ever catching a fairy, but even when your health is full, all you can do is keep pace with it. By the time you trick the fairy into running into a wall or some other object, chances are you would have already entered a battle, which ends up negating any benefits that catching the fairy would have had. Lost Kingdoms also features a surprisingly low number of cards. There are 108 of them, but many of the cards are just recolored variants with minute differences between them. I mean, there's no significant difference between a Ghost Armor and a Chaos Knight. They both have the same attack animation and the same attack speed. One is just stronger than the other and is of a different element.
Surprisingly, Lost Kingdoms sold enough units and in 2003, it earned itself a sequel. Lost Kingdoms 2 was a huge improvement over the original.
The game takes place 200 years after the events of Lost Kingdoms 1. You play as Terra Grimface, an orphan raised by a group of thieves known as the Band of the Scorpion. While on a mission to steal runestones from the Kandarians, you become embroiled in a struggle that ends up shaping the future of the world. Along the way, you discover the reason behind your abandonment and how you came to possess a familiar-looking runestone. While it didn't win any awards, the story in Lost Kingdoms 2 was significantly better than that of its predecessor. The world was much more lively, with each character having more fleshed out personalities. Just look at how Terra could respond to the shifty looking man trying to peddle rare cards. You could accept his offer by saying, "Here are 1,000 gold pieces." Or you could decline and tell him to get bent. If that's not personality, I don't know what is. Visually, the two games were very similar. Both games used similar art styles, graphics, and heads-up displays. Lost Kingdoms 2, however, had much more visible detail. I think this was due in part to the improved camera controls. Rather than having an aerial camera that was limited to 90-degree rotations, the new camera hovered behind Terra and could be rotated freely, which allowed you to see more of the details in the environment. Lost Kingdoms 2 also had better sound design. The music, while still a bit strange, featured better melodies. The biggest improvement in sound design, though, was the inclusion of voice acting.
And what idiot are you?
It wasn't spectacular by any means, but at least now you are able to know how to say many of the strange names.
What do you say? I live on the outskirts of Kadishu. Come visit if you can.
Where the two games really differed was in their approach to combat. While the original used random encounters like earlier RPGs, Lost Kingdoms 2 presented levels as vast, explorable areas with monsters patrolling certain regions. This meant that you could pick your battles and reserve your cards for tougher fights. Lost Kingdoms 2 also introduced new card types, adding helper and transformation cards to the mix. Summon cards were also tweaked and gave players the choice of 2 different attacks. These new changes resulted in many classic cards being adjusted to fit the new style of play. over 100 new cards were added, bringing the total number of cards to 226. A sixth element was also introduced. The new mechanical element was similar to the unknown element, in that it had no specific strengths or weaknesses over the others. Just like its predecessor, Lost Kingdoms 2 received a fair amount of praise from critics, but has been quietly forgotten over the years.
Overall, Lost Kingdoms is a short-lived but unique series brought to us by From Software. And while some of my affection for it comes from the rosy tint of nostalgia glasses, deep down inside, Lost Kingdoms and Lost Kingdoms 2 are overlooked games from an otherwise great era in gaming. If you have a GameCube, see if you can pick up a copy of either of these games. I think you'd be pleasantly surprised. My name's Psychotria, and thanks for watching my review of Lost Kingdoms.
Thanks for watching my video. If you liked what you saw, I hope you'll consider subscribing. Want to see more Lost Kingdoms? I did an entire Let's Play of it that you can watch by clicking here. Also, be sure to check out my other series, Game Changers, if you have the time. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.